creatures of the night. It's your girl Tati. Let's talk Dark Side of the Ring, Season 5, Episode 4, Saving Face, the Brutus Beefcake story. We do have Ed Leslie, who is known as Brutus Beefcake. We also have, being interviewed for this show, the nasty boy Brian Knobs, B. Brian Blair, Missy Leslie, which is his wife. We also have Greg the Hammer Valentine, Eric Bischoff, and the doctor that performed Brutus' facial reconstruction surgery. Now, we do kind of start off a little bit with them talking about his current wife and their relationship, how they met in the 80s, where she was a huge pro wrestling fan. And the first time she ever saw him on TV, she was absolutely in love with him. So she went down to one of the shows to go meet him in person and told him how much she loved him. Now, many years later, they end up reconnecting. When someone she spoke to, she was telling how much she was a wrestling fan and how much she was a huge fan of Brutus growing up. And that person knew where he lived and told her what area that he lived in. So then she goes and write him and tell him how much that she loved him and that she just wanted to fuck him. And he's, I guess, down for that, but he wanted to be friends with her too. They end up meeting and they have a friendship. Then they obviously started to have a romantic relationship, and then they end up getting married. Now, this is important because this is going to actually play somewhat of an issue in his life, I guess I can say, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the review. Now, they do go back and talk about how he and Hulk Hogan, which sometimes I might reference as Terry. You guys already know who I'm talking about when I say Terry. Now, they went to high school together. They lived 8 blocks away from each other. And at some point, Hulk Hogan wanted to be a wrestler. And then he ends up telling Ed, who is Brutus, about it. And he also wanted to train as well. Now, we do have Hulk Hogan, who is training with Hiro Matsuda's school. He's training with him, and everything that he's learning there, he's going back and teaching Ed how to do for himself so that he can also learn to be a pro wrestler too. Now, the two of them end up going from territory to territory, wrestling at different promotions as a tag team. Meanwhile, they were living in a van together and just trying to make it as pro wrestlers. They become a tag team. They're also known as the Boulder Brothers. Now, y'all already know, Vinnie Mac ended up snatching up Hulk Hogan and bringing him over to the WWF. And, Hulk is just like, hey, you know what? This is my friend Ed, and we like a package deal here. So if you want me, you're gonna have to take my bestie with me too. Now, Ed ends up going to WWF. They're trying to come up with a character for him. You already know they already had whatever they needed, whatever they wanted to do with Hulk Hogan, but they just didn't know what to do with Ed at the time. So Linda McMahon ended up calling him Beefcake, and Hulk Hogan ended up calling him Brutus. And he thought that was a really strange name. He didn't really care for it, but he liked Beefcake because he says he has a nice ass. So that is a reference to, I guess, how his ass is shaped or whatever. That's not what I said. That's what he said. He thought that the name was weird, but he went with it. He went home, lost 20 pounds, and then he came up with this outfit that was inspired by the Chippendale strippers, and he showed Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon loved it. Does that surprise anyone that Vince McMahon loves what a man is wearing because it's based off some type of strippers? That doesn't surprise me at all. Now, he comes into the WWF and he does fit in. He becomes a fan favorite. At some point, he does end up tagging with Greg the Hammer Valentine. They ended up winning the WWF tag titles together one time. They don't really mention that. I don't think so. They did win the tag titles together. And after that, they just told him, hey, we got this barber gimmick that we want you to do, so you're no longer going to be doing the tag team thing. He was really upset about it. And it got to the point where he went back to the locker room and pretty much destroyed the locker room. And Hulk Hogan goes in there trying to calm his ass down. And he tells him that, I don't want to do this shit anymore. Like, I'm quitting. He felt like the character that he had was just fine, and he doesn't know why they wanted to switch to a different gimmick that he felt like wouldn't work. And Hulk Hogan calmed his ass down and told him, hey, it's going to work out. Let's try this out. And he suggested that, when he's in the ring with his opponents, that he put them in headlocks and, use the scissors to cut their hair or whatever. He took Hulk Hogan's advice and ended up using that. And then that gimmick ended up getting over. Now, while that ended up getting over, unfortunately, everyone kept putting him in a situation where it's not just Brutus Beefcake, it is Hulk Hogan's best friend. So no matter what he did, it was Hogan's friend. Hogan's friend, no matter what opportunities he got, it was because of Hulk Hogan. And even Missy Hyatt says that most of the opportunities that he got in the wrestling business, he would have never had he not been friends with Hulk Hogan. So now that takes us to when he had a horrific accident. In 1990, he went to a beach house for 4th of July. Him and a lot of wrestlers, a lot of friends came together and they were having a great time. Now, the person who lived at that house name is Mike, and he had a yacht and he had other things, including parasailing, where a lot of people was interested in doing that. After hours of everyone taking turns parasailing, they were putting everything away. Then B. Brian Blair and his entourage came on over there, and they was like, oh no, we're late. We really wanted to do the parasailing. And, a few of us get a chance to parasail. Now, they was, not sure if they really wanted to because it was getting late and there wasn't as much wind as there was during the day. However, they decided to let some people get an opportunity to parasail. Now, they end up setting up a lady to, get on, and she was about to parasail, and he was helping her getting set up to start. Now, the boat starts, and this is where, they have that parachute behind them, and then they're supposed to pick up with the wind as the boat is going against the water, and they're going up in the air. There's not much air, but she's coming off the ground, and her foot is coming up. Now, she's trying to keep her feet, steady, but she keeps kicking around, and at the same time that she's moving her legs around so much, here is Brutus, who turns around and he ends up getting kneed to the face by this woman. Now, no one noticed right away that something is absolutely wrong. He said that he couldn't see anything and that he was in a lot of pain and that his top jaw was separated from his bottom jaw. It was absolutely insane. Then people started to realize something was wrong. There was so much blood. They ended up taking him to the hospital. He goes to the hospital and he said what he could remember is hearing the nurse scream out "Cold Blue" before they end up taking him to have surgery. Now, for this episode, we do have the doctor that performed the surgery. When they told him who it was, he had no idea. He didn't watch wrestling. And his son, who was a wrestling fan, told him who Brutus was. And he went to the hospital and seen him, and he saw him. He's like a big dude like this, had a nasty injury from a small woman. And he ended up doing this plastic surgery. He's a plastic surgeon, and he had to do 16-hour reconstructive facial surgery for him. They ended up putting, they put a lot of titanium strips on his face just to keep everything to, be the way it's supposed to be. What they did was they took his skin and pulled it back, and they pulled his scalp back, and they started from the top to the very bottom to reconstruct his whole face. And the doctor wasn't sure if he would live, but he felt like if he would live, then he would not have any vision. It was very low chances of him even living, and if he did, he probably would not be able to see. Now, because of how intense the surgery was and the injury, they ended up putting him into a medically induced coma for a few days. Now, they also asked Hulk Hogan to come by to the hospital so that when he woke up, he can wake up to someone that he knew. Obviously, his parents were dead at that point. He didn't have any family. So Hulk came over. His wife was pregnant during the time. He left his pregnant wife so he can be with his best friend. And when he woke up, seeing Hulk Hogan there, that did make him feel great, but he wasn't feeling well physically. Now, Hulk Hogan promised him that, hey, you can come to my house and you can recover there until you get better, and that he was going to take care of him. Now, Hulk Hogan stayed in the hospital with him for some time, and the first time that he went to go walk, he's walking with Brutus, and as they're walking, his eye fell out of the socket, so they had to fix that at some point. And he was absolutely in horrible shape. Now, he does talk about a time where Sherry Martel came to visit him. Before she got in the room, she was warned by the other wrestlers there to not be alarmed about his face. Like, don't react about how he looked. Just go in there, give him that teddy bear you bought him, and just don't make any reactions about how he looked. The second she walked into that room, she screamed to the top of her lungs, and they ended up snatching her out of the room because she could not handle how he looked. And honestly, with what he went through, you would assume that he probably would have never made it. And when you look at his face now, even today, he doesn't look like he ever had any situation like that. Now, as he was recovering, the bills were just piling up, so much money, and he couldn't wrestle, which was what he'd been doing his whole entire life. However, what ended up happening is that he went to I know he took like a movie role with Hulk Hogan. I can't remember the name of the movie, but he was fighting with Hogan in the church, and he was an Asian man. I can't remember the name of the movie, but you guys can look it up and probably find some clips on YouTube. Very strange. However, that helped him get a little money, and that also showed that Hulk Hogan was really a great friend to him, and no matter what opportunities that he was part of, he tried to put his friend into those situations as well. Now, some time has passed, and Brutus has his own segment on WWF, his own little barbershop segment, and that right there was helping him bring some money in. He's not able to wrestle and make money by wrestling, but he's able to have these segments, and unfortunately, that doesn't last. They ended up chopping the whole segment. They had Sid Vicious tore down the whole barbershop, and they didn't have that anymore. Now, what ended up happening is right around that time, the steroid trials is starting. Now, he is still contracted with WWF or has some type of relationship with them, and they go up to him and said, hey, Hulk Hogan, they're going to put him on the stand. He's supposed to answer some questions. You're his best friend. Like, what can you do to, make sure that he says whatever needs to be said so that he can be on the side of the WWF. Now, he was really upset that they even brought that over to him because he said that he didn't want to get involved, that he didn't know anything about the whole steroid thing, and he wanted nothing to do with it. He knew that he was just friends with Hogan, and he didn't want to have any issues, so he ended up just leaving the WWF and not wanting to have anything to do with them. Now, after this, yes, they do end up going back to the WWF at some point. And they were a tag team for a little bit, but it was short-lived. And then he ends up going to the Indies for a bit until Hulk Hogan went to the WWF and took his ass over with him. And honestly, once again, it's all about Hulk Hogan having that big name is what helped him walk through another promotion. So now we have Eric Bischoff who's being interviewed for the show. And the first thing he said is, I'm happy to be interviewed despite having to talk about Brutus the bullshit Beefcake. And I'm just like, I know you're not starting. The very first time you're opening your mouth in this whole thing, you're already starting some shit. I'm not going to go into no rant about how I feel about Eric Bischoff, so let's move on. Now, he does talk about his time in WCW. Now, while he was there, he went through like so many different gimmicks and characters. They could not use the name Brutus Beefcake. They couldn't use that likeness either, so they went through a lot of things with him. And it's pretty much like how he started in WWF, where because he was just coming in there with Hulk Hogan, they really didn't know what to do with him, but they were like, hey, it's a package deal. We're getting Hulk, so we gotta get his friend too. Now he's over there, and he went through a whole bunch of gimmick changes, also known as the Booty Man and a man with no name. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, Eric Bischoff had the nerve to call this guy bullshit when he gave bullshit names like that. Make it make sense, Eric. Now, he does talk about how while he was working in WCW, that Brutus was very professional. However, he was there partying and living it up and spending cash, and that, they had a hard time trying to figure out what to do with him. And I totally understand that. Now, Missy Hyatt says that during his time in WCW, they treated him like shit. And she felt really bad about that because she felt like he was a really great person, and so much of a great person that he once helped her when she went to commit suicide. He ended up saving her life, and she owes a lot to him for that. Now, after all those character changes, they call him up and say, hey, we're trying to repackage you. We just don't know what to do. we don't have anything for you. So now he ends up going home for a few months, ends up growing out his hair and cutting his body fat. And he comes back as an NWO member, as a disciple. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I actually did not remember this at all. Like, I had to look this up after, because I was like, disciple? I actually don't remember him being in the group. But I realized that the reason I didn't remember him was because he looked absolutely different from how he was in his time in the WWE and how when he started with WCW. So now when he went and had this major transformation, a lot of people did not even notice it was him. And at some point they even mentioned on commentary that it was him and that he had a major transformation. Now, some time had passed and things don't work out at WCW. He gets into some legal issues and financial issues, and he moves to Boston, and he's living in the attic, and he's working as a toll collector at a station. Now, here's the issue. One day he's working, and when he leaves his station, he leaves this little plastic bag of white powder. He says that it is a powdered aspirin. Now, for some of you who don't know, there's this aspirin called BC, where it's a powdered form. So for some people who don't like to swallow pills or whatever, they can get the powder form, just put it in their mouths, and it dissolves in their mouths. That's what he said he had. Now, right after he left his shift, the next person comes in and sees that little bag on the floor, opens that bag, and it pops and burst on their face. And this is around the time when they had that whole anthrax scare. So that person thought that they had anthrax on their face. It was a huge issue. They ended up closing down the station so that they can deal with the situation, because everybody was scared of anthrax during this time. Now, it came out that they determined that it was cocaine, and that if he was going to work for them, that he was going to have to go to rehab. Now, even on this episode, we have Brutus and his wife are still denying that it was cocaine. They said that it was the aspirin that was in that bag, and everyone else on the episode was saying, well, they're pretty sure based off how he was living his life that that was cocaine. Now, at that point, his wife that he had at the time was like, I'm done and over with this shit. They end up getting divorced. Then he ends up meeting his current wife that we have, Missy, and she ended up taking him away from all the bad influences in his life, taking him away from the drugs, and they ended up getting married and end up living happily together. Now, this is where their relationship becomes a problem with his relationship with Hulk Hogan. So, years had passed by. This is in 2008. He ends up connecting with Hulk Hogan. They are doing like wrestling related things, and everything is fine with their relationship. They met at Hulk Hogan's house. They had a meeting. Everything was great. And then they came back the next day, and he was basically like, get the fuck off my property. I don't want to have anything to do with you guys anymore. Now, according to everyone except for Brutus and his wife, they're saying that it's because his wife was absolutely difficult to work with, and that she kept putting her input into everything that had to do with his career. And at some point, Hulk Hogan was like, I'm just not feeling this bullshit anymore. Now, they do play a small clip of Hogan talking about their fallout. And to be honest, this clip doesn't really say anything at all. It still actually makes you have more questions of anything. And things just didn't work out. Now, she does go on to say that she did have a conversation with Hulk Hogan where she felt like this is a guy who's a millionaire who has all this money and all this lavish things, and he's only having my husband go out there to work for $600 an appearance, and said that's not enough money. All that money that he could be making, there's a lot of money to be made. $300 is not enough. And I guess that played into a role into why she was so difficult to work with. Now, since that situation, they didn't talk or whatnot, and they ended up fast forwarding to the 2019 Hall of Fame, where he was being inducted by Hulk Hogan himself, someone he haven't heard from since God knows when. He inducts him into the Hall of Fame. And I don't know if you guys remember seeing that speech, but he does mention about how Hulk Hogan was his best friend and how he would like to have more great memories with him in the future. That literally was the last time that he's ever seen Hulk Hogan, and he does talk about how much he misses him, and how, even though he's happy and having a great life with his current wife, he wished that his best friend was still in his life. Now, I'm going to say this. I really do believe that she probably was looking out for him and saying probably to Hogan or whoever it was that, hey, this amount of money is not acceptable for what he's working for or whatnot. And the situation is that when you have friends and getting involved in finances, that can be an issue. What he should have had was a representative, someone that could represent him, that would have gone to Hulk Hogan and his management and say, let's negotiate costs and things like that, because we feel like our client deserves to have more money. She probably went over there with a nasty attitude and got under Hulk Hogan's skin. And I can understand that. But knowing what I know about Hulk Hogan, okay, this guy is no innocent in my eyes. So it's a shame that their long friendship has got to that point, because no matter what he did, he always took him with him. And that right there shows to be a really great friend. I don't believe that they actually really got to the root of what the problem was that caused them to no longer be friends. But this was a great episode. I really did enjoy this. And just the whole thing about the facial reconstruction thing is absolutely difficult to listen to. But I'm glad to see that he's made a full recovery. Like, you look at this man's face and you'll never believe that he went through anything like that. Guys, thanks so much for watching my review. I'll be back next week with another episode. We have an episode on Harley Race. That's going to be very interesting. Can't wait to see that. But until then, you can check me out with my wrestling reviews and my watch-alongs. Guys, thanks so much. I'll see you guys in the next one.